Now, without further ado, cue the virtual music, the man, the legend, bum, 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 Dr. Jim Gaines. For those who don't know Dr. Jim Gaines, he is the chief economist at the Real Estate Center at Texas A&M University. Dr. Gaines is throughout the state. Dr. Gaines has more than 40 years experience in a broad array of professional real estate activities in consulting, research, and education, urban economics, land use analysis, and development and project risk assessment. Dr. Gaines was an associate professor of real estate and finance at the University of South Carolina before serving as president of Rice Center, an urban research affiliated with Rice University. And Dr. Gaines provided extensive real estate consultation service to numerous businesses, financial institutions, developers, and all levels of government organizations during his tenure with Arthur Andersen and KPMG. Ladies and gentlemen, virtual round of applause for Dr. Jim Gaines. Jim, thank you.
Thank you, Johnny. I appreciate it. I didn't realize you didn't realize it this morning, but you've got two speakers who are from Georgia. I was also born in Georgia, she was in Valdosta, I think she said, and I was in Atlanta, opposite ends of the state. But nevertheless, we got there. All right, Elizabeth, we're going to see if we can make this work again. I hope that all of you can see a full page intro slide. Can you see it?
We are seeing two slides right now, the original and the one that's up next.
Two slides right now. Well, you're not supposed to see two slides right now. Let's try that one.
Perfect.
Is that all right? It came up on my, we're not experts at this, guys, so it comes up on mine and it shows me about 3 different views, and I don't know which one to double click. So I hope you're seeing now a full-size picture of the intro slide, because what we're going to talk about is the Dallas economic and real estate outlook, really for the rest of this year. And I'll say to you very quickly that a lot of the comments that I've got are going to carry on into next year. Johnny was jokingly saying we had the crystal ball. I have one of those 8-ball things that I use regularly to try and guesstimate what's going to happen in the future. And I know some of you are probably in the same boat, but we'll see what's going on. Let's look at, here's what's kind of happening right now and sort of what's coming ongoing. And the key here on the general economy, and this is, I'm starting at a broad level. This is sort of the national level, and occasionally I'll even throw in some global numbers, because unfortunately the global economy is going to be one of those variables that's going to be affecting our national economy, which in turn affects our state's economy a great deal, particularly coming up in about the next 6 to 8 months and maybe beyond that. But first things first, the economy, we got to look for more jobs, more income, and everybody go out and do their patriotic duty and spend at least 110% of what you make, because we need all of that consumption into the marketplace to fuel the economy. As you know, unless you've been living under a rock for the last year, you're well aware that the COVID and the pandemic has affected everything. It shut everything down a little over a year ago during particularly April and May of last year. And it wasn't until about this time, latter part of June, the second half of June, and then on into July, that we started to see just those first little inklings. But also what we saw was the housing market begin its ascent into the stratosphere that it's been in for almost now a year. Talk a little bit more about that in a minute. So first things first, we had to get and have to get, put it into the present tense, we have to get the COVID and the pandemic under control. Now, I don't know what exactly under control means, but it looks like we're really getting into that level of activity. The vaccinations, we're nowhere near what the president's goal was, I think, by the end of June or July to have, X% of the adults vaccinated, but we're doing a pretty good job of it. I think everybody has finally gotten to the mental phase of the pandemic that we're tired of it. We're tired of having to wear a mask. We're tired of not being able to meet like this morning and having to do it virtually. Although we're also getting spoiled by all that. But anyway, so the vaccinations and the vaccination program, it looks like it's starting to have some major, obvious, major impact on the COVID and the virus. I'm an economist. You're going to see some graphs and charts in a bit, and I've got one on that for that too. In the past year, the major fiscal stimulus packages, and of course, this started prior administration, current administration. Literally, the federal government has poured out well in excess of $3 trillion and still talking about some more of stimulus packages and so forth. Particularly the benefit packages, the additional incremental package to unemployment insurance, which has helped millions of people, the PPP program, some of the small business programs. They've been fueling a lot of this recovery. I can tell you statistically, it's been an abnormal kind of thing because we have found total personal income for the U.S. has actually gone up significantly in the past year, even with everybody getting laid off and jobs being lost and so forth. I mean, we lost 20 million jobs last April and May. That's a lot of jobs, and we haven't made them up yet. But total personal income has been going up. Well, the reason for that is because of all the stimulus money or the transfer money, if you will, transfer payments from the federal government, particularly to individuals, and it's caused total personal income to go up. Some of that has shown up, of course, in rent payments for apartments and rent payments for houses, and even for savings and savings up for equity down payments and so forth to buy. The impact of that wasn't quite as much as was hoped for. It didn't all get spent dollar for dollar, and we're still feeling that impact. Now we're going to start seeing the impact of all of that going away. Incidentally, it was always mislabeled as stimulus payments. For so many people and so many businesses that receive these benefits, it was really survival payments. So you have to look at it from the right perspective. But nevertheless, they're going to give out. Now, it's been debatable, and of course, are we going to get some more, going to get less, and so forth. But it's about time for the federal government to back off and let the private sector create the jobs and create the income flow and so forth. It's a far more economically sound way of running the economy than just transfer payments and so forth, which is basically no productive use of the money. So we get increased household spending. People have been spending money. Durable goods orders are now down a little bit. But the interesting part is that the bulk of the economy of spending is for services. Everything from going and getting your a manicure and a pedicure to travel, to hotel stays, all kinds of manners, going to the gym and to work out, all manners of personal services, and that personal services expenditure is beginning to come back. It generally doesn't come back as quickly, and some of it might not ever come back. If you postpone buying a car, you can go buy the car later. But if you postpone taking a trip, you might or might not ever take that trip at all. So the services expenditures is a little bit difficult to see. But we're looking at that increase in PCE, personal consumption expenditure, mainly from jobs and the pent-up demand and savings. As all of you are probably well aware right now, particularly in the real estate industry, major supply chain and inventory problems. And by inventory problems, I'm not only referring to the lack of houses to sell. We'll talk more about that in a little bit. But inventory at the retail level, if you've been to a car dealership here lately and tried to buy a car or truck, you'll discover they don't have any either. Their inventory, because all of the modern new cars and trucks require computer chips, and the computer chips are in short supply. In fact, they basically dried up altogether, and it's going to take a while to get that to straighten out. The other part that affects the real estate market is the same computer chip shortage for appliances, refrigerators and dishwashers and everything else. The chips are not available, so the appliance manufacturers are having a great deal of trouble in supplying the inventory there. So we're seeing these kinds of supply chain. That's become really part of that global issue that I was referring to, and that's going to take a while to work out. And it's going to take. It will get worked out because there's too much pressure for demand. The prices will go up. We've seen it with lumber and other kinds of things. But we will see that supply chain inventory problem keep on here probably for at least another 6 to 12 months. So it's not like it's going to disappear next week, but it is going to linger around. The Fed has already said they're going to keep interest rates low. It's going to be a little harder in the second half of this year, which we're going to start here next week with July 1st. We're finding inflation is a big issue. You're going to hear me say this three more times here this morning. Yield expectations in the real estate world and in the financial markets are getting substantial as investors get nervous about expectations of future inflation. They start making pricing decisions today on what they're going to pay for assets. So it's going to be interesting, particularly in the commercial real estate arena and in the rental market, single family rental market, of what effect that has. Again, it's not going to happen next week, but it's going to be a major player or a big player as we go into the second half of this year and then on into 2022, as I've kind of indicated there. The inflationary pressures are there. I'm going to show you a chart here in just a few minutes. You're going to I don't know if you're going to be surprised or not, but it's going to be very real. And we'll talk about that going on. Okay, 2020, it was the best of times. It was the worst of times, to use a very poor quote. But as you can see, in the second quarter of the year, we had the worst on record fall in GDP at 31.4%. It never been anything like that before. That's an annualized quarterly change. And then followed by, though, the third quarter, the very best growth in GDP. Now, for those of you who are mathematically oriented, you already know this, but if you're not particularly math oriented, if you go down 30%, you have to do better than going up 30% to break even. You basically have to go up close to 60% to break even. Because of the way the arithmetic works. So it didn't balance out for the year. For the year 2020, the U.S. was down 3.5%. We actually did pretty well. As I've given you some numbers there for some comparisons with UK and France and Germany. And for the first quarter of this year, that's the latest data we have. It was about 6.4%. Growth, which was very, very good. Of course, fourth quarter of the year actually turned positive. It was the only positive quarter we had. Some of that was because it couldn't get any worse. And we carried it into the first quarter. We're expecting the second quarter to be very good. And we're expecting the year to probably finish up in that 7 to 7.5% growth range, which will be exceptionally good. And you can see going back at least to 2016 how we were kind of hanging around at the 2% to 3.5% range for GDP growth, and that was sustainable and pretty good. 2018 was the only down year in there. There was an energy problem that year, so it didn't do too badly. Here's sort of the good news, and I said that all of the economic forecast that anybody's making is still dependent on getting the COVID and the pandemic under control. And oh, by the way, there isn't an economist in the world that has known what the hell they were talking about for at least the last year. And we're guessing. We're all just really kind of guessing at what's going on for the rest of this year and on into the first half, particularly of 2022. because we've never gone through something like this where we've had just a state mandated shutdown and close down of not just the Texas economy, not just the US economy, but basically the global economy. India, China, Great Britain, Europe, Japan, everywhere has been affected by the pandemic and shut down their economy or slowed it down considerably. And we've just simply never experienced that kind of thing before. But here's the good news. You can see and this 7-day moving average, if you try to look at that graph of the day-to-day movement, it goes all over the place. But on a weekly average, if you will, new cases, the blue line, the deaths coming down. It appears the vaccination program, which really didn't get started good until January, and really not until February, that it has had a major impact on the number of new cases and, of course, the reported deaths in what's going on. We haven't recovered. I mean, the bottom line of all of the economic analysis is, guys, we're still short almost 7.5 million jobs, about 5%, from just where we were in February of 2020. We're using that as our benchmark of, it was February, no, it was March of 2020 when the impact of the COVID became so apparent and the shutdown started. It was the second half of March. So we're using February of 2020 as the benchmark. And we had employment at about 152.5 million. We're back up to right at about 145 million. The best guess for the coming month for June, June numbers aren't out yet, but we're thinking that it'll be somewhere in about the 450 to 500,000 job range. But that's still a long way away from getting us back up to just where we were to break even. You can see the significant drop off. That was the 20 million plus jobs that were lost in basically April and May. That's that big orange drop that you see. And you can see that very quickly it did try to rebound, but it only got back up about halfway and then has sort of leveled off or not leveled, but slowed down considerably in terms of the improvement. Now, it is true that there are right now a record number of jobs available. Jobs being posted for available is well about 9.3 million jobs. We've got about 8.6 million officially unemployed people. That's a debatable number, but nevertheless, that's what the official statistics. So evidently, we got a lot of jobs and we got people unemployed, but we're not doing a good job of matching it up. Some of that is a problem of skills. Some of that is a problem of willingness. Some of that is, of course, retirement. People have, some of the good guys, that's the people over 65, are deciding to go ahead and take their retirement and so forth after living through all this and not come back to work. And they haven't shown up yet officially in the statistics of not being unemployed people. So we're going to see some of those kind of disparity. There's still something like 15 million people, plus or minus, that are claiming some kind of unemployment. And that's down from over 20 million, but it's still a significant number of people who are claiming regular unemployment or some of the beneficial programs, some of the added programs because of the COVID and so forth that came along. It's going to take a while to get that back to some ring. I was talking about inflation. This is one of the clouds on the horizon that as economists we're beginning to watch. We expected the increase. That you can see it there on the far right, the sharp movement up on the both the core CPI and the CPI. The core, of course, is regular CPI minus food and energy, and you can see that even the regular CPI has been going even faster because at one point here, energy was actually going down. So we saw it not go up quite as fast. But the question remains, is this going to be a temporary blimp up in the inflation numbers and then come back down to that, you can see where it had been hovering around the 2% number, or if it is going to be an actual increase into 3 to 4% category and sort of stick there over a longer period of time. If that happens, that's when the Fed starts moving in and starts increasing interest rates and so forth, trying to get the inflation under control, get the economy from running too hot, and having prices go up too fast. It remains to be seen what is going to happen. I can tell you that right now in the literature, and if you read the press and so forth, we've got economists coming out on all sides of the issue that the inflation that we're seeing now is going to be very temporary, very temporal, and then it's going to all come back down to about what it's been the last several years. And then others are saying, no, it's going to jump up into this 3, 4, 5% level and stay there. Some have even said it might go back to like the 1970s. Powell gave a speech here this past week where he was very emphatic, as emphatic as a chairman of the Fed ever is, which is not much, that he is not anticipating that kind of, the double-digit inflation that we had back in the 70s and so forth, and that the Fed will make sure that that doesn't happen. We'll have to see how this all works out. And this is what I'm telling you. Here's the weakness of the crystal ball has gotten real cloudy. It's not a clear-cut issue here. And of course, one of the things that's leading to this and contributing a great deal is the increase in housing costs. Not only the price of housing, which actually doesn't really show up in the CPI as much, but in increased cost of rent and owner's equivalent rent, which is the economist's way of trying to incorporate the increased cost of home ownership into the CPI numbers. It's a big fancy equation, algebraic equation, algorithm, if you like the word, to compute that. And there's big debate of whether or not it's correct and overstated or understated, particularly understated here in the last 7-8 months as the way that home prices have been increasing. Shouldn't it have more impact here on the CPI as being calculated? It doesn't right now, other than this imputed rent. But right now, the imputed rent that's being included in CPI is not contributing as much to this big surge that you're seeing. That's a long enough explanation of inflation. We could go on for an hour about that. Here's interest rates. I know everybody in the real estate world worries about interest rates. The Fed funds rate, which is that short-term overnight bank lending rate that the Fed announces regularly, is still down at the 0 to 0.5 range is their target group. We plot it out at 0.25%. We just don't believe that it goes ever completely to zero. It could, and it could even go negative, but it hadn't. The 10-year Treasury is that rate to really watch if you want to know what's going to happen in the future. You can see how it jumped up here since last fall and during the early part of the winter, but you can see here in the last month or so, it's kind of evening out. The same thing for the 30-year fixed mortgage rate. This is the Freddie Mac 30-year fixed mortgage rate that they release. These are monthly numbers, so I try not to get into the daily variations and even the weekly because it can jump around pretty quick. But you can see it's hovering right there around. It went down under 3%. It's probably at about 3.1, 3 1/8, something like that on an average across the country. I'm well aware that you can find individual lenders and deals. And it's a matter of whether you get 30-year, 15-year, what your FICO score is and what your income, how much down payment you're going to have, especially the loan to value ratio, that you can negotiate and find other rates. But this kind of gives us a picture of what, and some of you won't remember it, that it wasn't that many years ago that the mortgage rate was, up over around 6%, 6.5%. But it's been for the last decade, it's been extremely good. It's been pretty much running right at 4% and less than 4% a good deal of the time. So extremely good rates there going on. Let's see if I can get this. I don't want to be a downer, but there are some things that we are paying attention to that you might want to just make sure you pay attention to. And these are some potential headwinds that we see for the overall economy. And it could be any of these, some of these, all of them. It could even be some others that I don't even have on the list here. But most of you are pretty much aware that the stock market has been going really wild lately. There's a wealth effect. People feel wealthy if the stocks and the Dow Jones and the NASDAQ and the S&P are all going up in positive relations. Earlier last week, it went down a good bit. That got a lot of attention, but it's back up again. And of course, if you watch it on a daily basis, unless that's your business, it'll drive you absolutely nuts. And quite honestly, I have no idea what it all means on a daily basis. Generally, it's being influenced by the investors who are either buying or selling and taking profits or not taking profits. The financial markets, we've got to watch monetary policy, watch what the Fed is doing. The Fed has grown in importance. It is buying the bonds, it's buying the treasury bonds, it's buying the mortgage-backed securities from Freddie and Fannie. That ought to be just one, Franny. And so we're seeing the surge in interest rates and yield targets. I mentioned that a minute ago. That's what we've got to watch out for there. The global economic slowdown and the failure to recover from COVID has been mixed. We've got some countries recovering faster than others. Some are still in almost shutdown mode. It's been amazing. UK has been hit hard. India has now been hit hard. And those have international and then global economic impacts that we feel here in the US. Those lead to the trade and the politics and the supply chain disruptions that I mentioned as well. We're also one of those headwinds. There's a lot of debt running around, a lot of federal debt. Our sovereign debt, our national debt is running right now about 133% of annual GDP, which is the highest it's ever been. It's higher than it was right at the end of World War II, and that was after we had to pay for a world war. And we haven't had anything like a world war, but yet we've been deficit financing everything, and that sovereign debt has been going up. So we have to watch that. The runaway inflation, I've already mentioned the inflation, and the fiscal policies, taxes, spending. It's going to be interesting to see what happens here in the coming year on fiscal policy and the tax rate and how much gets taxed and the spending. Just the infrastructure program that keeps going in debate here lately. I know I'm being challenged here by my yellow lab in the next room. I think she's gotten over it. Somebody walked up to the door and made a delivery or something. That's one of those perils of working at home. You have to.
She was just agreeing. She was just agreeing.
Yeah. She didn't like what I was talking about on runaway inflation. She wants it to run toward her. Anyway, but the fiscal policies, the taxes, and the spending are going to be quite interesting to see what happens. Let's turn to Texas and talk more specifically about Texas. Texas, of course, got hit with a double whammy last year. Right at the beginning of the year, in late December of 2019, January, February, March of 2020, price of oil collapsed. We had an energy collapse that affected Texas. Primarily, it affected those areas of Texas that are much more energy dependent than others. So Houston and Midland and Odessa and Victoria and Corpus Christi and some of those areas got hit early on with economic downturn because of that energy decline. Other areas, and Dallas-Fort Worth area particularly, it was like it never occurred. I mean, it's the irony is that J.R. Ewing notwithstanding, Dallas is not an oil and gas energy town. It's not really affected by them. I use that as a joke, but you need to understand the rest of the world, because of that TV show, thinks that Dallas is an oil and gas town. If you've traveled around the world and talked to people, they actually think that because of the way of that TV show. The recovery's picking up. Of course, we got hit with the pandemic. Here's the Texas economic recovery as we see it. And number one, of course, is COVID control. Everything is COVID control dependent. So you just start with that umbrella and say, okay, until or unless we have it. And it does appear we're getting there. We are getting that control. The cases, I've got the same chart here for you in a minute for Texas. We're doing that. So the reopening of the economy is going to take all of this year. It started the first half of this year. It's really going to start coming in. And I've been telling a lot of people here this for several months. Look for the second half of this year, starting next month. And there's nothing magical about next month or the second half, except it was good. It was going to take the first 6 months of this year to get the vaccines out, to get things rolling, to start reopening things. You can even go to a Rangers game now, and you can actually get a ticket and go and watch it play. And these kinds of activities, and stores reopening, and hotels reopening. Airlines, I can tell, I just traveled here this week. I can tell you the airport was pretty crowded, and a lot of things going on. But it's going to take a while, and that's going to move on into even the first half of next year before we really can say that we're back to where we were before all this started. Remember that employment chart I showed you a minute ago, that we're still down 7.5 million jobs nationally. It's going to take a while to get there. Job recovery is active. It's still a little sluggish. It's not as robust as we might think. And we're going to have to work on that. Consumer attitudes and spending, of course, are a major issue. We're not having problems with that in Texas. Evidently, Texans like to spend money. We like to go to restaurants. We like to go do this. We like to go that. One of the things that I am stressing for the future, and this is going to start, this is my late 2021 and then on into 2022, is the entrepreneurism. Yes, we are going to see a number of businesses, thousands of businesses throughout the state of Texas, and thousands perhaps in the Dallas-Fort Worth metropolitan area. A lot of businesses that simply aren't not going to be reopening their doors, that they just got hit so hard by the pandemic, they are not going to be able to reopen. But Texas is a very entrepreneurial state. Going into business, starting a business, generally it's relatively easy. It's generally relatively cheap as compared to other areas of the country. And we are looking for that entrepreneurism to come through and stimulate the business sector, reopen, reestablish, or rebuild the lost businesses of the past year. Energy is not likely going to be our driver. We're not going to see that in the state of Texas, really in the future, anywhere near like what it's been the past 50 to 60 to 70 years. Energy is still going to be an important industry. It's still going to be a basic industry, but it isn't going to have the degree of importance and the degree of impact that it has had in the past. And especially here this year and next year, it doesn't look like energy can be relied upon to be the kind of driver of the economy as it was in the 20-teens. The 20-teens was a remarkable decade for the state of Texas, for Dallas-Fort Worth particularly. Part of that, or a good deal of that, was driven by a thing called hydraulic fracturing of oil extraction, and that was the major driver in the prosperity of the state during the 20-teens. We don't think that's going to hold up in the 2020s and then on, especially into the 2030s, for a number of reasons, not the least of which is, of course, to try the movement to move away from fossil fuels and more towards electrical and solar and wind and so forth, and renewable energy sources, but also just the technology. We're going to produce as much or more oil as we ever did, but we're going to do it with machines and robotics and so forth and high technology. So it's not going to be creating the same number of jobs and the same kinds of jobs that it has historically done. Housing is still going to continue strong. Most of you are going to quit listening to me here in about 2 seconds. The housing market in Texas and the housing market in Dallas-Fort Worth, I'll go ahead and tell you the bottom line. Yeah, it's going to continue being strong. It's not going to be as exuberant as it's been the last 8 or 9 months, where houses are selling within a matter of hours of being listed with multiple offers and all that. That's irrational and really not sustainable. And you almost don't want it to be that way. You don't want the market to be so short and so out of balance. It's out of whack. Economists will always want the economy to be in whack. And when you have that kind of thing, it's out of whack, and we want to move back toward whack. I hope you. That's high technical economic speak. But anyway, the housing market is going to continue to be pretty good, and it's going to be strong. I'll show you more. State and local government, though, boy howdy, the next few years are going to be interesting. The state budget is being debated. Local budgets are in some trouble. The school district should do okay because the property values have been going up, so the property tax base has been holding up all right. There may be a correction next year, though, for some of the asset pricing for commercial real estate and industrial. But so far, we really haven't seen that pricing impact of the virus hit yet. So the property tax portion should be all right. The sales tax, of course, dropped off the chart and is slowly coming back. And then, of course, our economic recovery is going to be also a function of we're just going to keep adding people. Now, we added over 4 million people last 10 years, ending in 2020 at a little over 29 million people. We may or may not add another 4 million, but even if we added another 3.5 million, that's still going to be very significant population growth. A good deal of that is coming actually from foreign immigration, is still very significant for Texas, despite all of the problems attendant to that and the immigration issues, but also from other states. And of course, a lot of the people who've been moving here during the pandemic, one of the pandemic effects of people moving here has been they've been bidding up the price of housing. Let's see. Why did this quit? There we go. Whoops. I told you that we've been doing good in Texas, just like the national, the COVID looks like it's getting under control. We can see that the cases and the death toll, the unemployment claims, in fact, are beginning to come back down to the pre-pandemic levels of around 25, 35, 40,000 instead of, up over 300,000 when it peaked. So we're still seeing that. There's still a good carryover, almost 200,000 people claiming unemployment, but we'll have to see how that works out. Every once in a while, this thing just does not want to. All right, there we go. I don't know whether it's my machine or just Zoom, but anyway, here's the similar chart on employment in Texas. We're doing a much better job trying to recover back, at least get back to where we were back in February 2020. We're down about 3.8%, about 500,000 jobs. We're averaging about 45,000 jobs a month. We can pick that up here the second half of this year. We expect by the end of the year, the 2021 job growth will actually be up about 6%, but that's going to be up 6% from the fall off from 2020. So it's the growth rate isn't quite as remarkable as it might seem, but you can see that if we do get there around that 6% job growth, that we'll have beat out the 2019 level, and we're really using that as our unit of comparison to see if we're on the right trend. Here's what I was talking about, the energy market. The price of oil, as you can see easily in the orange line there, the price of West Texas Intermediate crude has easily recovered. It's up over $70 a barrel. But the number of rigs new rigs being created on a monthly or weekly basis in this case, it's kind of leveling out at just a little over 200 or between 200 and 250. I think last week was 221. And it's simply not creating the job growth that historically has happened. Dallas-Fort Worth employment, very similar to the state. You can see it's doing its best trying to come back up. It's up to about 3.8 million, where it peaked out at a little over 3.9 million jobs. So about 3%, about 128,000 jobs down, growing at about 20,000 jobs. 20,000 jobs a month by the end of the year. Again, like the state, we're projecting about a 4% growth rate in jobs. It's still been tough getting people to go back to work and then matching the job opportunities with skills and abilities and so forth. But we do think that by the end of 2021, and when we look back on the annual number, that it will be in excess of the 2019 number, to use that as the real benchmark of where we'd like to be. We'd like to continue that growth that you can see started back in 2010 and had a nice upward slope to it after the Great Recession when we had the drop off in 2009. So yeah, it's very doable, right on track. In fact, current numbers are pretty much on track to show this kind of growth. If we do it, we'll have added about 109,000, almost 110,000 jobs to the Dallas-Fort Worth area. Won't quite make up all the job loss, but it's real close, and we'll see that happen. The DPI is the Dallas-Plano-Irving Metropolitan Division. That's the east side, if you will. It's the Dallas side of the Metroplex. And just to give the picture, and you can see the counties there. The key is, of course, it's got Dallas, Collin, and Denton counties, the three biggies, if you will. And of course, the Fort Worth, Arlington is the other metropolitan division, which has Travis County over on that one. But anyway, looking at this, it's down about 64,000 jobs. Again, one of those kind of things. This is employment. This is thousands of people, not seasonally adjusted. So it's the actual count. And of course, that'll change because every March, the Texas Workforce Commission changes the numbers. Let's talk about housing. I know that we're going to run out of time here for a minute. The market is being driven by these things. Demographics. We got the millennials coming in. I mean, Johnny was mentioning the millennials there earlier. One of the things the millennials have learned, to your chagrin, because there's nothing you can do about it, you're getting older. And whether you like it or not, you're getting older. And you're now getting into the life cycle of being married, having kids, buying a house, and so forth. Also, the Gen Xers and the boomers are also entering the market and the home buying market, interestingly enough, trying to buy down. Unfortunately, we're not, I'm one of the boomers. Unfortunately, we're not doing it enough to create inventory of properties for sale. So it's been kind of an interesting paradox that a lot of people that might like to sell their house are not selling because they can't find a house to buy. So you have the paradox there, and that's one of the things leading to the limited inventory, particularly in the lower price categories, but really at all price categories, as I'll show you a little bit. And it's that limited inventory that's causing all the price increases, which of course then affects the affordability. The change in prices relative to income. Eventually, we anticipate that to slow down. The rate of increase on home prices on median and average is going to slow down and come back into quote unquote normal ranges. People can afford to buy a house somewhere between 3 to 3.5 times their annual income. It's just that simple. And when you get that number up, that income to price to income ratio up to about 4 or 4.5 or 5 even, the market is completely out of whack and it doesn't last. It's just not sustainable to do that. We have and continue to have historically low interest rates. I think that is going to continue for the rest of this year. I don't anticipate, we may see some increase in the rates. It'll be gradual, but even if rates today, where they are today, if they were to increase 10, 20, 30 basis points and maybe start approaching 3.5%, I think most of you would agree with me that, yeah, there'll be some people right on the edge, on the margin that might get affected, but overall it isn't going to have a big impact in slowing down the housing market. We don't anticipate a big slowdown in the housing market till really it's about 4.5 or 5%. Then people start paying more attention. The ease of mortgage financing is more important. And right now, actually, according to the Mortgage Bankers Association, their Mortgage Credit Availability Index, which is available online, just Google search it if you want to go look at it, is getting a little tighter. Mortgage companies and the lenders are requiring, and many of you are probably running into this with your clients, higher FICO scores or more down payment. They're just making it a little bit tougher to get that loan made. Technology, of course, has changed everything. One of the pandemic effects in the real estate world has been the online sales and closing. We've got Zillow and Redfin and others trying to be the Amazon of housing. and have everything go online, and you can do the entire transaction and never meet anybody face to face and never even go see the property. It can be virtual tours and all kinds of other things. So the technology, some of those changes are going to stay in place, some are going to slow down. And then, of course, we have the wealth effect from the stock market and the fact that people for the last year haven't been spending as much money, so they've been saving and maybe have a higher down payment to work with in this thing. Home building, of course, is going great guns, but the home builders are beginning to see that they've got some problems because they got a shortage of inventory. They can't sell the house. They can sell anything they can build, but they can't build them fast enough. They can't find lots. They can't get their labor. They can't get their materials. The cost of all of that is going up, forcing them to sell more expensive houses. We're going to see that that blue line. It's at a record high. I mean, that even at 80% housing market index, the blue line there, their HMI is very high and good. And you can see the starts have been following suit. But I'm hearing now from the builders that they're not going to take an order for a new home anytime right now because they can't build the ones they've already got under contract. They're so backlogged and so backed up. Let's look at Texas. I'm going to move into Dallas here real quick. But what I would point out to you, you can see that the first quarter 2021, that's the one on the right, and it shows the median price is up 13.4%. and from the first quarter of 2020, and that the first quarter of 2020 was a reasonable quarter. That's a reasonable comparison to look at. But what you'll see is the proportion of sales. Sorry about that. I get all choked up when I talk about the housing market. The proportion of sales that are in the lower, under 200,000 has fallen from almost a third of the market to less than a quarter of the market, whereas the proportion of homes being sold that are above 500,000 has grown from a little less than 10% to 14%. It's that distribution of the sales that has really caused the medians and averages to be reported so much higher, as much as actual price increases, although it's both. But the arithmetic is helping that. The other number I would point out to you, the active listings are down 53%. Yeah, if you don't think we've got a shortage, yeah, we got a shortage. We got half as many properties listed as from a year ago. And at 43,000, it was an interesting statistic that we were given there earlier about having a million and a half realtors and a little over 1 million houses listed for sale. The same is true here in Texas. I think there's something like about 150,000, 160,000 licensees, and we only got 43,000 properties listed for sale. For those of you who are in the business, getting into the business right now, going out and being in the listing business is as good as being in the sales business. Go find the houses where people want to sell. That's the reason why we're reporting 1.3 months of inventory for the state. That's an incredibly low number. As all of you know, I'm with the Real Estate Center at Texas A&M, and in Aggie speak, it just is, we ain't got none. We just ain't got no inventory to sell. So it's a real problem in trying to do that. Here's what the graphic looks like. Here's what we're expecting 2021 to look like by the end of the year. We think sales will be up about 8%. Prices are going to be up on average for both the average and the median around 8.5%. And that's being conservative, but we'll have to see just how that goes. New home construction is going great guns. And it's interesting because it's almost exactly a parallel of what happened in the 80s. It took us 16 years back from 1983 to 1999 to reach the prior peak, or to exceed the prior peak in new home construction. And it looks like if our prediction for 2021, which is a 15% increase, if that holds up, that we will see again a 16-year gap or time period from the prior peak back in 2005, when we were basically giving money away for people to go buy a house with all the funny money. to come back to that peak. But of course, you can see there, it took 2020 and 2021 gigantic increases to get to that level. 2020 came out at about 23% last year. Here's what we're looking at around the state. This, I got to tell you, this is our outlook that came out. We put this out in January. It's in the process of being revised. We always do a mid-year correction. It's like a mid-course correction if you're driving your car and you thought you were going to Florida and you find yourself in Kentucky. So we're doing our mid-course correction here this month. So I don't have it yet, but this is what we were looking at. And quite frankly, I don't think it'll still be positive. It might not be quite as positive on the housing permits, but we'll have to see how that goes. Dallas, Fort Worth, Arlington. Here's the similar graphic for you guys that I'm showing you the same decline in the lower priced home sales from about 17% to about 13% under 200, and up from about 12% to nearly 17%. It almost reversed positions if you look at the arithmetic there into the higher price category. Again, the active listings down 57%. Closed sales were only up 1.4%. It wasn't as good, wasn't as numerically different as you think. But it's down to 1 month inventory, and again in Dallas Fort Worth, you ain't got none. So, and all of you, I'm telling you what you already know. Many of you see this if you go out to the Texas Realtor or the MetroTex Data Relevance Project or the Market Viewer with the Texas Realtors website. And I'm just highlighting a few numbers. What I would emphasize is the year-to-date number, the 12.1% increase in sales. Year over year for the last several months is going to be phony because last year, remember, April, May, June were such irrational and difficult months. The year over year comparison really doesn't mean much. The days on market, that's that green box over there. When you're down under 30 days on average, you're selling properties just about as quick as you can list them. You can see the active listing count is continuing to fall, as is the month's inventory for single family, eliminating the townhomes and condos. It's less than 1 month. And the other interesting statistic to us was that the average close actual sales price to the original listing price is now a little over 100%, which means that people are bidding up the price above listing price. It'll be interesting to see how long that will continue. That number is normally in the 94, 95, 96% range, something like that, maybe 97. But whenever that number gets up over 100, it means people are paying more than listing price for the property. And then you can see it's the breakdown between existing and new construction. The new construction is kind of interesting because the price increases aren't as dramatic because the builders are actually trying to figure out how to build in the lower price markets. So they're not building as many $700,000-$800,000 homes as you might suspect. The pattern of sales, and I've limited this to the east part of the MetroTex, since you're with MetroTex and the Dallas area, I thought I'd look at that. And what you'll see there on the tail end of both of these curves is that it's beginning to tail off. The month-to-month change is actually going negative. It's actually slowing down. Year over year, yes, it's still up, it's still positive, and it's slowing down from a very high level. So it's still at a very high level. So far, year to date, you can see the percentage of sales, by these by the price categories, and you can see that the 300 to 500,000 market is over 40%, and then the 200 to 300 is well over 20, is almost 27%. So and the month's inventory. That's a ridiculous chart over there because it really should show something like 6 months. And instead, every one of these is less than 2 months, even the 500,000 plus, which normally benchmark would be somewhere between 10 and 12 months. New home inventory, months inventory, existing home inventory, all coming down under 1 month is just nuts. Average and median prices, a little bit misleading because of the distribution of sales and the way the arithmetic is computed. But you can see that since 2010, the average is up 75% and the median's up 93%. It's almost doubled. Really, really nuts. Strong demand influences going forward. The pandemic affects how we work, where we work, space needs, what kind of house, what location. There has been a marked movement into the suburbs of people. Now, if they can work remotely and not have to live as close to their job, they can move further out. We will see that. We're going to see in the design, people, houses now, one of the things that people are looking for is 2 offices, 2 master bedrooms, of course, for multi-generational properties. The demographics, we're still going to be influenced by the 26 to 40 age group, and Dallas is very heavy. Dallas-Fort Worth across the board. First-timers over 43% of the sales. That's very high. Normally, that's only about 31%. And individuals, it's been reported that individuals buying homes, particularly single women, buying homes as much as couples. The economics are exactly what you'd think. Jobs and incomes, number one. You got to have, it's real basic. You want to buy a house, the first thing that somebody's going to ask is, you got a job? And then what's your income? Low interest rates, a little bit higher savings rates, and then the pricing and interest rates is pulling some of the future demand forward. People that might have put off buying a house for a year or two are buying it today instead. On the supply side is a real problem. We have a very limited supply of existing homes. People are not selling. The average tenure rate has gone from 5 to 7 years, is now something like 9 to 12 years. So people just aren't turning over their houses as fast or as rapidly as they used to do that. The boomers are aging in place. Even some of the Gen Xers are aging in place and not being quite as mobile. Part of that is because they can't find a place to go move to, but that's kind of interesting. The supply of new homes and the limited supply of new is going to continue, despite the fact that starts are going to be way up and home construction is going to be up. Still isn't enough. We're still going to be hundreds of thousands of houses short in the state of Texas and in the Dallas-Fort Worth market area on the new home category. So that's what I'm saying. The housing market for the Dallas-Fort Worth market is going to continue to be strong. It probably won't have the same grabbing effect and the same kind of out of sight movement, the multiple bids on some properties and that sort of thing. That's going to kind of level out here over the course of time. But I think it's going to take 6 to 12 months for that to really, really start showing up. I appreciate it. I probably have run a little bit long, but I think I'm still under 12 o'clock, which Elizabeth warned me was my time limit.
No, that's perfect. And it was a ton of great information. We are so thankful you were able to join us today, and we can't thank you enough on behalf of the North Texas Associations. And at this time, just want to kind of give a shout out to all of the different associations that are participating. And I'm going to go ahead and do this in an alphabetical order. This is such a unique opportunity for all of us YPNers and those who may not be a part of the YPN family yet, but are YPN at heart. The Abilene Association, Arlington Board, Collin County, Granbury, Greater Denton Wise, Greater Fort Worth, Greater Louisville, Greater Metro West, Greater Texoma, the Heartland Association, Johnson County, MetroTex Association, Navarro County, Northwest Louisiana Association, we invited them as well, and Stephenville Association of Realtors. Thank you all for your support. Thank your AEs. Thank you. If you do have a YPN committee, thank your leadership, as they've all helped us put on this event today. And at this time, before we get into the networking, we have some door prizes to give away. I'm going to hand that over to Skylar and Elizabeth. We'll be quick about it, but must be present to win. So